War? Why war? Of sun there is enough for all, but a somber magic casts a spell on life. Therefore, war. War? Why war? Is it bedded deep within our core, as the atoms in our cells and in the heart of stars? War. Why war? Is it ordained? A law of nature, or only man's creation? War. Why war?
This medal he received at his airbase because he was an excellent pilot. This one was given to him after the Yemen War. It's a medal for the wounded. That's the Medal of Courage. And that's the last one, the Star of Honor, the one they give after death. And that one is, of course, the most precious to me. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. I was talking to my aunt on the telephone when I heard the rumbling of a plane and then the explosion of a bomb. I felt ill. My aunt cried out, "What's the matter? Answer me, you don't feel well." I answered, No, it's nothing. Later, I heard that Sameh's plane had been shot down by the Israelis the same minute I'd had this kind of hallucination. These papers are not letters, they are thoughts. Thoughts that Sameh jotted down now and then when he had a moment. I only read them after his death, and I discovered this poem that revealed a whole part of him that he'd kept hidden from me. He never showed me that he was suffering, that something tormented him.
الصراع أي سحر هذا الذي يجعل قانون هذا الوجود يرتكز على هذه الكلمة. أهو الصراع الذي يحكم وجودنا جميعا وكل نجم وكل كوكب؟ أهي لازمة من لوازم هذا الوجود أم هي من صنع البشر ومن أفكاره؟ أليس هناك مجال لا صراع فيه؟ لأن حتى الفترة القصيرة اللي أنا قضيتها معاه
The short time I lived with Sameh was so important to me that I never thought of looking for another man.
أفكر في البديل أبدا يعني، فالحمد لله يعني. هو شخصية ما فيش شك ممتازة، ما قدرتش إن أنا أفكر.
He was unique, and he gave me everything, to the point that it never occurred to me to start a new life. After his death, I dreamt of him for a very long time. He had not abandoned us. He was there, among us, with us. He was here at home, watching over the children.
It's the first time I hear my mother say all this, and the more I listen to her, the greater she is in my eyes. All I hope for is that one day I can repay her for all she's done for me.
It was very hard for her. Mother was very young, in her 20s, and we needed her so much. And she had no experience of life whatsoever, and she had to cope all by herself.
What I'd do if an Israeli woman wrote to me, a woman who, like me, had suffered from the war, at least we would have something in common, our refusal of war. Well, at least that's what I hope. I don't really know what the women think over there. After all, what would stop us from living in peace? I don't know. I don't know.
After his death, they kept telling me, Rachel, your son died for his country and for God. Because he didn't die on the road or at sea, my son, he died for his country. Then a year later, with my heart still broken, I sent my 2 daughters to the army. Then they called me the heroine. These rockets are a symbol in memory of a young man killed at war. They are the entrance of the local club. This young man was my son, a hero who lived here in Ashkelon. I remember the last picture of him. It was taken at his brother David's bar mitzvah. He looked so happy, and I was well dressed, and he kept repeating, "Look how pretty my mother is." I'll never forget the happy look on his face. In the morning, I sit down in the corner of the kitchen where his picture is, and I tell him, "Ah, if only you were alive, we would have coffee together." When Yossi was killed, I got sick, very sick. I had to spend 2 years in bed. That's when I got diabetes and all my illnesses. That was 21 years ago, and my sorrow is still the same.
My sister Rachel continues to mourn her son. She feels so lonely, although she has many other children. That's why I stay with her. In Ethiopia, they didn't teach me how to read. They married me young, and I started having babies when I was 15.
I don't say that only for myself, but no mother should make such a sacrifice. I don't want any more wars. If an Arab woman wrote to me, I would respond with words that would make her happy. I wouldn't talk about Israel and the war, but tell her, may peace come with God's help. Let's be sisters, as it was before all that.
My childhood was very different from other children's. When I would ask where my father was, they would show me the cemetery and say, "These walls are your father. This stone is your father." Every time I heard a child call his father, it hurt me because the word father was denied me. I kept hearing people speak about those things, and when I came home I pestered my mother. Why the war? And Daddy, why did he die? And what's a shahid? What's a martyr? I was too small then to understand the meaning of that word. All I know is that I suffered. I suffered terribly. When officers in uniform passed by the cemetery, and one of them would ask me, "Well, little one, is all going well at school?" I started imagining he was my father. The truth is, I didn't really see the man's face bending towards me. I only saw his uniform. But it made me so happy. It's written here on the stone, Boutros, priest's son, Air Force officer. My father was the very first Coptic officer killed during our very first war against Israel in 1948. Number 1. I dreamt of my father for a long time. Well, so to speak, I didn't really see him in my dreams because I had never known him. I'm on top of a high mountain. I jump. I fly, and then I fall into a void. And I crash, the same way my father's plane crashed. Maybe subconsciously, I wanted to relive his death. It was mad, this physical link, so painful. It was as if my very soul was killed. And then one day this obsessive dream disappeared. It disappeared the day I started to work in aviation. Today I work as an architect for the Abu Simbel airport. I feel at home here. Planes, pilots, a kind of family. It's soothing. It makes me feel good.
في وسط الصراعات والضيقات اللي كنت فيها طفلة لولا شعوري.
Without my faith, I would have been crushed. I so desperately needed a father. I talked to God as a child talks to his father. He replaced my father. He still replaces him. God, Father of us all,
أبويا وأبو كل الناس. طبعا الحروب.
War is destruction. It is also the destruction of families. War destroyed my mother. She was so young, and there she was all by herself, a widow after only a few months of marriage, a widow and pregnant. All her hopes faded at the very beginning of her life. As for me, I have only bitter childhood memories.
War has distorted our relationship. She'd even blame me. Really, Mummy, you complicate my life too much.
War means death. Death. And women who live lives worse than death. They suffer. They feel terribly lonely.
بيعانوا في الحياة الكثير والكثير. الانتقام يكون من أجل مصر يعني.
I shall not give up a millimeter of our country. I'm ready to give my body and soul for Egypt. But let's be clear, I do not seek revenge.
أنا دمي ونفسي وروحي كلها من أجلها.
Israeli people are humans, just like us. How could I not respect an Israeli woman who suffers because of the war, just like me? If she'd write to me, I'd tell her, let's hold each other's hands and embrace, and may peace finally come.
It's been 30 years since I visited Yehuda's grave. To me, he's still alive. He lives in my heart. I just can't accept that he's there under that stone. They took out the nails of the coffin lid and I saw him. You'd have thought he was alive. I touched his cheek. It was ice cold. I tried to feel his body, but they dragged me away from him. In those days, there was just rough ground around here. They dug a hole in the ground and put him in it. After the funeral, after the salvo of honor, I heard one of the officers say to another, "Good thing he didn't have children. One thing less the army will have to worry about."
הרבה פעמים הייתה אומרת לי, שולה, אני מפחדת. אנחנו יותר מדי מאושרים. לא יכול להיות.
She often said to me, Shula, I'm afraid. I'm afraid because we're too happy. Can such happiness last? And I tell her, come on, stop seeing bad omens everywhere. When Yehuda was killed, Hadassah's world collapsed. I, as her sister, thought she'd go mad. My husband and I took her in to live with us, and she even slept in the same bed with us.
Yehuda and I used to go to the seaside to look at the sunset. After the funeral, I went back to the beach. I couldn't believe how life went on, how the world continued to turn, the sun to go down. The birds played in the sand. The things went on as usual, and that he was no longer there. Yet I'd seen how they buried him. My hand had felt how cold he was. I simply couldn't believe it.
וראיתי שהוא כפול. לא יכולתי לתפוס את זה. אני במשך 7 שנים חלמתי כל לילה.
For 7 years, I dreamt the same dream every night. Yehuda appears in the leaves of a big green tree. It's terrible. So hard to talk about it.
זה היה נורא. קשה לי לדבר על זה. עכשיו לא. חלמתי לא מזמן, אבל...
Recently, I dreamed again the same dream I dreamt every night for 7 years. Yehuda comes to me and can't accept. He wants me to go back to him. It's awful. And I tell him, it's impossible. You know perfectly well I remarried. I now belong to someone else.
הייתי נורא מזדעזעת.
My parents were very religious. They didn't believe in medicine, only in prayer. If one of the children was ill, they prayed. They prayed the whole night. God will provide for us. That's what they'd say. I believe I could say that my mother died for lack of care and food. We were so poor.
שיראו את הסרט, תביאו אותו קצת קדימה. אדם אחר שהיה עובר את מסלול החיים שלה.
Any other woman but my mother would have been destroyed. Religion, fanaticism, poverty, and then so young, the loss of the man she loved.
בגיל כל כך צעיר.
Yehuda had a brother who lived in Toronto. I'd never met him. He was married, he had children. And I, if I wanted to start a new life, and I did because I so desperately wanted to have children, I had to put up with the chalitza, and for that I had to go to Toronto. The chalitza is a dreadful ceremony. In the old days, a brother-in-law really married his widowed sister-in-law. Today, only a ritual remains that frees them from having to marry. The ritual calls for the presence of 7 rabbis. The brother-in-law has to purify in the water of the mikveh, the ritual bath. He has to carefully cut his nails. Then one of the rabbis laces a holy sandal on the man's foot while repeating, "This is what the Torah ordains." At the end of all this, I had to spit in my brother-in-law's face while saying, "This is what is done to the man who doesn't want to marry his sister-in-law." When time passed and peace still didn't come, when the wars continued, I started to think about the women on the other side. There were Arab women over there, just like me, who had loved, and whose loved ones were taken away from them.
War had come and his time had come, and it was finished. War or no war, everyone dies. When your time has come, it's your time. But he, my son Hashim, his death is more beautiful than ours. He's a shaheed, a martyr. Oh, if the sand that will cover us one day could be as soft as the sand that covers him. Oh, how wonderful that would be. That day, his time had come. Some die stung by a scorpion. Some drown. Some fall off a roof.
No, nobody killed our son. The war killed him.
A shaheed is someone who dies for God's cause. Do not believe that those who are killed for Allah are dead, for they are alive next to God. It's written in the Quran. A shaheed, a martyr, is very important for the government, for God, for everyone. The shaheed goes straight to paradise. His mother, his father, all those who loved the shaheed go to paradise. If the shaheed's mother and father need anything, the government gives it to them. And if they want to go on pilgrimage to Mecca, they don't have to pay anything. He read in the Quran, my son. He knew how to read, not like me. He told me right from the beginning that he wanted to die a shaheed. He told me 3 times, may God make me die a martyr. I only think of God. At night, when I cry, my son comes to me. He tells me, don't cry, God forbids it. I'm not dead, I'm here, seated among you. He brings me something every time. He puts it down, and then he leaves.
We loved each other. We really loved each other. Nothing separated us, except, of course, what God forbids. We were still like brother and sister. Hashim had a good heart. He was kind to everyone. He was always happy, always laughing. Even today, when people talk about him, I shake from head to toe.
Anyone who enters my home can have tea with me and have a nice conversation with me. Visitors come from God. And even if she was an Israeli, after all, she didn't kill my son, did she? She didn't kill him. All that is God's will. We pray to God, and just as He takes from us, He gives to us. He gives us patience. He soothes the burning in my heart. It is all God's will.
How can I describe Arik? He was a rather ugly redhead and different from the rest. His parents were communist. To be a communist was greatly disapproved of at the time. And he, ideologically, he wanted to go even further. It was Arik who made me read Marx when I was just 16. And from then on, I started to ask myself questions. Questions that others never ask themselves. I told them Arik wasn't a hero. Arik went to war against his will. Perhaps in your eyes I'm a war widow, but I don't ever want to be branded as such, ever. No matter what, get up and get out of here. It's a symbol I brought back from Germany. I thought it would be good to show it to our country, where the army is revered. And that, with a bit of humour. I refused to join the army. I feared they'd steal my personality. In the end, I told them, okay, I'll join, but I won't do anything. I'll sit down on a stone and I'll read Alice in Wonderland. The morning he was called up, Arik went to look for his uniform at the last minute. He couldn't find it, and he said ironically, "So, which one do I wear? The real one or the fake one?" Arik began acting because he simply loved it. But after a while he got tired of traditional plays. He became more and more involved politically. Arik was an idealist, and it became important to him to convey a message. I remember in particular 2 satirical plays he directed in 1972-73, which had horrified me. At that time, I was still completely apolitical. Since then, I've come a long way. Many things shocked me, such as this dubious respect people have for war widows, and all the stories about soldiers' heroism. It was a very difficult situation to endure. It was during the war of June 1967. I'd just given birth to Arik's child, and I was torn between my own joy and her suffering. My husband was alive, while in the room next to mine, my friend had just given birth to a child that would never know its father. The news had come the previous day that he'd been killed in the war. This friend had always been very traditional in her ways. She's become what I call a professional widow. In her home, there are medals all over the wall, and she never misses a commemoration ceremony for soldiers fallen in the war. The parachutists, the tank division, and so on. I said to myself after seeing her again, in 7 years' time, I won't look like that. I won't live like that. Arik would never have accepted that. I refuse to play that role and everything that goes along with it. The pressure this society puts on war widows is unbearable. To be a slave of memory forever, that's what's asked of them. I refused all that right from the start. When I saw them come to my house like clowns in their stiff uniforms, with an expression meaning, "You're one of us," a widow of a fallen son of Israel, I was disgusted. I decided that I would never in my life take part in their masquerades. My situation is a little unusual. I'm still registered as a war widow, and I'm still considered as such. I've been living with Eli for 12 years, and we're still not married. In Israel, only religious marriages are recognized. It's impossible to have just a civil marriage. And as I won't have anything to do with religious people, I'm fed up with all their rituals. I want to live the life of a modern woman. And so I continue to receive my war widow's pension. And I like the idea that the couple of thousand shekels the army pays me each month will at least not be used to build new colonies in the territories or finance their war machines. Those machines that have killed and will continue to kill many more like Arik. If a woman from the other side wrote to me, an Egyptian, an Arab, any woman shattered by war like me, I'd reply to her, first of all, as a woman, because our suffering is the same. Over there, it's like here. Our sons, our husbands, our brothers are all alike. All are forced into war by the same fanaticism, the same nationalism. I keep fighting for change. Things must change. They must. If you want to change things, you have to pay the price. In the beginning, I kept quiet, and I didn't dare speak out. Then I started to fight. I keep fighting, even though I know that I might pay the price one day.
War. Why war? Is it ordained? A law of nature? Or only man's creation? War. Why war?